Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is Meaningful Jewish Living. This is class number 1 of Jewish Life Cycles. We're going to spend time this evening working through the first part of the Life Cycle series, which is baby naming, what's in a name, the significance of a Hebrew/Jewish name, the difference between girls and boys as it relates to baby naming, the value of having a name, the circumcision, which takes place typically on the 8th day to Jewish baby boys. And hopefully we'll cover some bar and bat mitzvah as well. Everyone should be able to see the screen. So follow the instructions, go to menti.com, use the code on your phones or another device perhaps, so you can stay with the class. And let's see if we can make this as interactive as possible. Feel free to, at any time, ask any questions via the chat, and let's roll. Okay, guys, first question. See some answers, 5 answers. Okay, pensive, distracted, happy, mixed, tired. All right, I'm all of those and more. And I want to acknowledge that today, for those of us in America, has been and will continues to be a very long day. And there's a lot happening in the background. And there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of unknown, and there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of mixed emotions for all of us in very different ways. I'm acknowledging that, and I feel everything that everyone feels here, and more. But I also want to encourage everybody to put it by the side and put it by the door, because you made a decision to join tonight for the class, and you made a decision to stop and to pause and to learn a little bit. So to the best extent you can, leave all that stuff for afterwards. There'll be a long night ahead of you and a long day tomorrow and a weekend to focus on all of that. And tonight we're going to spend some time together learning and discussing and hopefully growing together in our understanding of the most important parts of the Jewish life cycle, which is the beginning part of the journey. The first major religious event in the life of a Jewish individual is what? Everyone feel free to unmute themselves or to put in the chat. What is the first major religious Jewish ceremony that happens to a Jewish person?
Bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah.
Excellent guess, and you certainly get points for being the first one, being so courageous. But actually, it goes back a little bit earlier than bar bat mitzvah, which happens at a particular age. What else?
Bris?
Excellent, but bris doesn't cover all Jews, because bris is only for who?
Men.
Correct. And yes, bris is only for the guys. So what's the first major thing that happens?
Picking a name.
Choosing a name. Excellent. And there's tremendous significance given to the importance of choosing a name. For a Jewish baby boy, the major religious event in their life, the very first major religious event in their life, is the Brit Milah, is the circumcision. Although 8 days old, a child is merely a passive participant in the journey of, no, I don't want to do that. Although just at 8 days old, a baby boy is just beginning their journey, nonetheless, the Brit Milah is the most defining mitzvah, commandment for a Jewish boy that begins and traces back to Avram Avinu, to Abraham, some 3,800 years ago. The physical circumcision that happens to a Jewish boy is the only mark that Jewish religious practice makes on the body. And I want to underscore that the circumcision, I'm putting the sources for tonight back into the chat if you just arrived. One thing Zoom doesn't do is it doesn't allow you to see the chat if you join late. So penalty for you for joining late, but welcome everybody. And now you have the sources that are in the chat as well. The physical circumcision is the only mark the Jewish religion places on the body. It's a lifelong symbol of Jewish faith. The Brit Milah represents the reality that each individual is created incomplete and therefore needs something to happen to them to allow for completion. And we'll discuss a little bit what that means a little bit later on. So let's look at the sources. I'm going to share the screen, but we can also look at the sources on your own, which have all been shared in the. Okay. We're going to cover baby naming. We're going to cover the Brit. Let's start with the Brit. The mitzvah of Brit Milah, which is the Hebrew name for circumcision. Let me make the screen a little bit bigger. Can everyone see screen? Great. Is the unique mitzvah given to the patriarchs. And the fulfillment of the Brit Milah by Abraham and his descendants, even before the Torah was given to the nation at Sinai, is indication of its centrality in Jewish faith. Certainly the mitzvah of Brit Milah has captured public opinion concerning the Jewish religion, and it is a very well-known aspect of becoming part of the Jewish faith. What does it mean? So the first thing to understand is the word Brit Milah. What does the word Brit mean? So it translates to covenant. Something about this physical act that happens to an 8-day-old baby is extending, creating, formalizing a covenant. That's the key word here. The word Brit actually has a double meaning in the Hebrew language. It means circumcision as well as covenant. And the act of circumcision is in of itself a covenant, and it's a covenant between who? Between man and
God.
Excellent. It's a covenant between man and God. And a covenant is far more than a simple contract. A covenant is a binding, irrevocable pledge between two separate parties. And through this original mitzvah of Brit Milah, which actually is very connected to this week's Torah portion, Abraham is connecting himself to the Jewish people, and therefore, by continuation, all of his descendants as well. Let's have a look at the first source by Nachmanides, one of the foremost Jewish commentators and philosophers, known as Ramban in Hebrew. He comments on the Torah portion on Bereshit in the Torah, on the chapter 9, verse 12 of Genesis. He says, every visible object that is set before two parties to remind them of a matter that they have vowed before them is called a sign. And every agreement is called a covenant. Similarly, in the case of circumcision, God said, and it should be a token of a covenant between me and you, because the agreement that all the descendants of Avram be circumcised to serve him with a united resolve.
Got it.
What Nachmanides is telling us here very clearly is that the milah, the Brit, the act, is a sign of the covenant between God and Abraham. And a further major name in Jewish commentary, known as the Maharal. We'll talk a little about who these identities are at a later stage in the year. The Maharal lived in the city of Prague in Europe. And he writes that every time the word Brit appears in the Torah, Torah being the 5 books of Moses, and the word Brit has different meanings because it has different uses throughout the Torah. He says every time you see this one word in the Torah, it translates to mean something permanent. It's because through the Brit Milah, one has an ongoing relationship with God, just like any two people who have a covenant between themselves. And he adds a beautiful definition of the act of Brit here. And Nachmanides says it's something that is permanent. It's irreversible. It's irrevocable. It's a permanent fixture. And we look straight in the Torah, chapter 17, verse 7, and we read exactly what God did when he sealed this covenant with Abraham. I will ratify my covenant between me and you, and between your offspring after you, through the generation, as an everlasting covenant to be a God to you and to your offspring after you. God is saying to Abraham, I'm welcoming you as the founder of the Jewish people, as the progenitor of the Jewish people, And by this physical act, you are now entering into a covenant with me, but not just you, all of your descendants. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall circumcise their flesh or their foreskin, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. Okay. Let's go back for a second to our Menti. Go to menti.com on your phones. I'll use the code if you're not with us, code 115826.5. You'll see on the screens. Another question coming up, but it's a we have limited time for each question. So everyone has to tell me thumbs up when you're ready. All right, ready for the next question? "30 seconds. Shouldn't take you more than 10 seconds, everybody. Three answers for 15 people in the class. That doesn't make sense to me. 6 answers. No points. 7 answers. Okay, we have a Jonathan, we have a Joseph. There's no correct answer. Thank you, Menti, I know that. David, Tamara, Joseph, Noah, Sarah, and Jonathan. Okay, so it's important to think about what our names are. A, what they mean, and B, why our names were given to us. What do our names mean? And we could take this discussion also in terms of our English names, the names that we go by. What does a name represent? What does the name mean? And how does it have a connection to really who we are? And that's important to think about when the Brit Milah, a discussion which we're doing right now, because at the Brit Milah is when one gets their Hebrew name. So what's the obvious question? For Brit Milah is something that happens only to Jewish boys. What's the next question you'd ask me? Don't be shy, because I can unmute you all.
When do girls get their name?
Excellent, Tamara. When do girls get their names? Right. So that's something to put in the corner, and we'll come back to it. Why is the name so important? So, more than any other mitzvah, the act of Brit Milah is intimately related to Jewish identity. And as a symbol of the covenant between God and his people, and the physical manifestation of Jewish faith, Milah virtually defines Jewish identity. And it's therefore fitting that of all the mitzvot, only Brit Milah is present on the Jewish body. Let's talk a little about this idea of identity. The Brit Milah defines who we are. And it's perhaps for that very reason that Jews throughout Jewish history have been prepared to make incredible sacrifices for the sake of upholding this mitzvah. And there are stories into the triple, quadruple digits of Jews throughout the history, throughout the generations, and most recently in the former Soviet Union, where Jewish ritual was banned, where they would go to great lengths to fulfill this mitzvah because of what it represents, of this notion of deeply connecting it with identity. We're going to study texts throughout our journey together of lots of different famous Jewish rabbis and philosophers. And there are some names that are going to come up all the time. And towards the end of this meaningful Jewish living course, we're going to have a class devoted to unpacking who their identities are and who they are. So right now, we're just going to confuse you with all their names. But rest with the knowledge that they're all great rabbis. They've all contributed amazing commentary and books to the kaleidoscope of Jewish texts. And one that we'll spend a lot of time quoting from virtually, possibly every class, is Maimonides, is Rambam. His contribution is profound, is unbelievable. And we're going to look at his book, The Guide for the Perplexed, which is not sort of bedtime reading for anybody. If you're looking for a book to read tonight, I wouldn't pick this one up, but it's an important book on your journey of Jewish knowledge. And he writes the following, chapter 3 in text 49. In my opinion, there is another very important reason for the mitzvah of milah. Namely, there should be a common physical marking on all the people who uphold his faith, acknowledging that there's one God. He said it's a symbol of Jewish identity that everybody should have this mark on them that is physical, that represents identity. Rabbi Pesach Krohn is a ritual circumciser. He lives in Brooklyn. He travels around the tri-state area and beyond. His profession is performing Brit Milah, but he's also a wonderful Jewish storyteller. He's authored many books. He travels around, speaks a lot, and he writes the following. After not having a child for 6 years, Major Dr. Raphael and Sarah Lerner were blessed with a baby boy. On the day of the Brit Milah held at the West Point Officers Club in West Point Military Academy in upstate New York, the entire hospital staff, more than 100 officers, colonels, and lieutenants, along with the commanding general of West Point, gathered for the festive occasion, smartly attired in his army uniform. Major Dr. Raphael Lerner stood at the attention together with his fellow officers as Rabbi Moshe Tendler from Monsey, New York, spoke of the following words. Here at West Point, one can have appreciation of what a Brit Milah ritual circumcision symbolizes. Every cadet, every officer must always wear the badge of his army as an indication of his loyalty to the military of his country in which he serves so faithfully. For Jews, beginning with our patriarch Abraham, a Brit Milah has the badge and symbol of our commitment to God and our Master General, whom we will serve dutifully and loyally. Today, as we affix this badge on the newest soldier among us, Milah, says Rabbi Krohn, is a badge and a symbol of our commitment to God. It's a powerful thing that unites every single Jew, no matter of observance, no matter of affiliation, that pretty much all Jews go through this act of ritually circumcising themselves. The Talmud writes the following: if somebody declares, I prohibit upon myself to take any benefit from circumcision, they were forbidden to receive benefit from the uncircumcised of Israel, and he's permitted to receive benefit from the circumcised among Gentiles. Here it's a very powerful saying, says the Talmud, which only adds a level of sincerity and depth and underscores the importance of this commandment. Even if he is physically uncircumcised, to be included in the covenant of Milah, this is the basic definition of what it means to be Jewish. We'll skip over this next source. You have all these sources at home to read. And I want to come back to this idea that throughout the generations, thousands of Jews have gone to great lengths. So let's talk for a moment about the other gender, females. Why don't females have a Brit Milah? And why does a Brit Milah happen on the 8th day? And what is the symbolism of where a Brit Milah happens on the sexual reproductive organ? So let's start with the first question. Why is there no similar or equivalent for a female? Are females not worthy of entering the covenant like their male counterparts? And the answer is simply that girls enter the Jewish covenant with God without the need for any process that parallels the male species. And I hate to break it to all the men with me tonight, but we're different than females, and not just physically different. And if I'm breaking anything to you, then I apologize. The perfection that males are only able to achieve through severing their foreskin is actually and ultimately inherent in every female. And there are many different explanations given to unpack this idea further. But yes, ultimately women are viewed differently. Men wear this thing on their head. I choose gray because it blends with my hair color. But men wear skull caps as a constant reminder of God's presence. And the Yiddish name of this is what? What's the Yiddish name? Anybody?
Yarmulke.
Thank you, Anais. A yarmulke. And that translates to two words that were conjugated together. Yar, Yira, Malka, the king, fear of heaven. Women don't have to wear kippot because women have a natural understanding. And similarly, when it comes to the concept of circumcision, a physical sign of bond between man and God. Women don't need a physical reminder that God expects certain things from them, because women are born with this higher spiritual level. And that explanation is sourced in many different writings, in the Talmud, in many other places, that women are just born with a higher spiritual level. Men need physical reminders, both on their heads and to have something happen to their bodies. Why do we take this physical act, and what is the connection to the location being the sexual reproductive organ? And there's deep significance there. Anyone have any suggestions?
That's how the generations continue, one after the other.
So there's definitely a clear linkage between a mitzvah that was given to Abraham and all of his descendants to the physical act taking place on the sexual reproductive organ. Correct, Jerry? And it indicates, perhaps we can take this in many different directions, and we could talk about this for hours. It indicates that the sexual drive, the most powerful of all of our inner drives, no matter how hungry you are after Yom Kippur ends, and no matter how thirsty you might be on a certain day or after a certain workout, the most powerful inner drive that we have as human beings is our sexual drive. And it's a reminder and an indication that it needs to be channeled for love in a relationship, and not be used selfishly, and ultimately and certainly not to be abused. And the idea of the circumcision is absolutely not to inhibit or abolish the sexual instinct in any way, because that is actually impossible and undesirable. Rather, it's the flip side, we could say, that it's to place the sexual drive, which is essentially impersonal and selfish, and place that in the context of our relationship with God. Even the most powerful and the most natural instincts that are ultimately also perhaps the most animalistic in many ways must be raised to the level of a mitzvah, which is beyond nature. And at the same time, we can say that the sexual reproductive organ represents the continuation, as Jerry said so beautifully, of the nation. And therefore, our physical survival is beyond nature. Jews have been persecuted for as long as there have been Jews. It's the most ancient profession, is anti-Semitism. And history has demonstrated that in every single generation. But our existence is beyond the scope of nature. And there's a reminder there that God wanted to establish this nation who would be a permanent reminder of his existence. And it's a continuity of the nation that he's reminding us through the act of Brit Milah and the specific location. So we answered why not females, and we answered why the sexual reproductive organ, but I also want to know what is significant about the 8th day. Why not the 2nd, the 3rd, or the 15th? Any thoughts? Okay, pause your thoughts. Next question. Menti.com, use codes 1158 265. My Jewish identity is best described by my, let's go. I don't see any answers yet. Everyone know how to use Menti? Everyone know how to use a computer? Three answers, 17 people, 4 answers. I'm going to start to connect these answers to IP addresses. I'm kidding. My Jewish identity is best described by my name, my heritage, my clothing. Interesting. My kippah, Shabbat, curiosity, deeds, maintaining traditions. Okay. Actions, heritage. Okay. So what is about the 8th day? Anyone? What is it magic about the 8th day? So although from a medical perspective, the 8th day of an infant's life is the most preferable because of safety factors and elevated levels of vitamin K and other necessary elements to prevent hemorrhaging, that's not the primary explanation. There's actually a deep significance to why the 8th day is designated for the Brit Milah. Jewish wisdom and Judaism reflects that, yes, the answers that are coming into my inbox via the direct message are on the right path. Judaism places great significance on numbers. I'm not telling you to go and buy a Tats lotto ticket tonight, but there are some Jewish numbers that are extremely powerful and very Jewish. Give me what's a Jewish number?
13.
7.
Okay, I would not have guessed either of those to be the first ones, but they're both Jewish numbers.
17?
18.
Oh, 18.
We're not bidding here, but you're correct. What's 17? I know what the number is, but what's Jewish about 17? I'm not sure either. But 18 is a very Jewish number. 18 is Chai, which is the Hebrew word for life. So 7 is an extremely Jewish number. 7 is the cycle of a complete cycle, and we know in the story of Genesis and the creation of the world's created in 7 days. God rests on the 7th day. So 8 comes to tell us something really special and significant. Deep significance of why a Brit Milah happens primarily if the baby is healthy on the 8th day. The mitzvah of circumcision, which God gave to the Jewish people, is above nature, and therefore is performed on the 8th day because the 7 days of creation are the 7 days of nature. For the natural world was created in 7 days. The 8th day is therefore above nature, and according to its natural course, a child should remain uncircumcised, but Brit Milah is happening on the 8th day, which is above nature. And another concept, which is rooted in Jewish teaching, suggests that the reason why the Brit Milah is performed on the 8th day is that man, according to nature, was born with a foreskin, which represents a level of deficiency and lowliness. And Brit Milah represents the rectifying of nature, which happens on the 8th day because it's beyond the order of nature, still tying to the same idea. So we've covered Brit Milah, but baby naming for a girl doesn't happen on the 8th day. A newborn girl is named typically in the synagogue whenever the Torah is read. In most communities, the Torah is read on Shabbat, as well as a Monday and a Thursday. We'll discuss at a later class why Monday and Thursday we read the Torah at the morning service. But it's most auspicious to name a baby girl in the presence of the Torah. In the presence of the Torah, specifically when we read the Torah, because that's the time when more people are found in synagogue. I want to do this in a grand and as big way as possible. And the father of the daughter is called up to the Torah for a special prayer, and the mother is, if she's in synagogue, is there together, standing, and the mother recites a special blessing of thanksgiving known as Birkat HaGomel, and in the presence of a quorum of 10 men. And that's the major way a baby name is created. All Jewish children should be given a Hebrew name, and the Hebrew name is used in what parts of their life? When do you use your Hebrew name, other than tonight when you all told me your Hebrew name?
Bar mitzvah.
Your bar mitzvah, okay. When else do you use a Hebrew name? So some people are known by the Hebrew name. My Hebrew name is Daniel. I'm also called Daniel. But some people don't ever know why you have a Hebrew name. So you have a Hebrew name for your bar mitzvah or your bat mitzvah. You have a Hebrew name for your ketubah, which is your marriage document. You have a Hebrew name when you're called to the Torah. You use your Hebrew name when you're praying on someone's behalf for well-being, for health, or any other reason. You use a Hebrew name to invoke the memory of a person when they've since left this world and their yortzeit, the annual anniversary. And in many places, we use our secular names, our English names, or other names, but it's the Hebrew name that is connected and tethered to our religious and Jewish identity. If you're not born Jewish, when do you get a Hebrew name? Anyone?
When you convert?
After conversion?
Excellent.
After a mikvah, right?
Yeah. So the mikveh being the end journey of the conversion process. One of the greatest misconceptions about Judaism, is that Judaism doesn't accept converts. It's a huge misconception. And therefore, when we do welcome converts, at the completion of their conversion, the Hebrew name is the last thing they select. And after you considered a fully fledged Jew, the convert is entitled to the same rights and given the same status as any person born Jewish. And at the concluding Beit Din, at the process of the mikvah, they select the Hebrew name, often have selected the name in consultation with friends or partners or rabbi beforehand, and that's when the name is given to them. If the person converting is a male, they also need to conduct a circumcision. It is very popular for many males who are not Jewish to also undergo circumcision for medicinal reasons and for health reasons. However, if you convert, you need to go through what's called as a ritual circumcision. Once the foreskin has been removed, there's no more foreskin to remove, but you go through a special process in the presence of a rabbi who can ensure that it's done in the correct manner. The vast majority of secular Jews, perhaps 98% of Jews in Israel, continue to circumcise their children. It's a mitzvah that has not gone away. The mitzvah that, as I mentioned earlier, has taken a huge part in the Jewish identity of young Jewish boys as well. And the baby name is a huge part of a identity and the first religious ceremonies for a born Jewish girl as well. Okay, any questions about baby naming, bar the Brit Milah or the female naming process? Okay, let's continue. Next question. Show how to get rid of the leaderboard. Which of these things does a Brit Milah need to include? No one wants to have bagels and lox at a bris, or no one thinks they need to be there. Who answered Rabbi? Tell me why. Anybody?
I answered Rabbi because I thought there was a blessing that was given.
Okay. And who answered a Jewish born baby? Why do you need a Jewish born baby? It's kind of obvious, right?
Right.
So you do not need to have bagels and lox, although they have become the symbolic food that Jews like to eat at a ritual circumcision at a bris. You do need to have a Jewish baby. You don't need a rabbi, but you do need someone who knows how to ritually circumcise. That is often not the rabbi. And this rabbi doesn't know how to do it either. And thank God I have 3 sons, and I was present at all of their brises. But I didn't do the ritual circumcision because it requires extra training, particular training, and something that I wasn't interested in doing. Don't think I'll ever be interested in doing it. But you don't need to have a rabbi. The benedictions and the prayers and the blessings are typically recited by a rabbi. but do not need to be recited by the rabbi. Okay, we have another question. Ready? And let's go. Oh, let's go back to question 2. That wasn't fun. Okay, Jewish adulthood begins when one celebrates the bar bat mitzvah, one reaches puberty, or one chants the Torah portion. The vast majority of Jewish children, irrespective of their religious affiliation, celebrate a bar and a bat mitzvah. Of course, the manner in which a Jewish boy or girl celebrates a bar and bat mitzvah varies greatly depending on their tradition, their community, their religious affiliation, their synagogue affiliation, their socioeconomic status, so many varied factors. But the event is almost always commemorated by every family. But a bar and bat mitzvah is not just an event. It's a time, and it's a stage of life that starts with the maturity of an adult in adulthood. And the word bar is an ancient Aramaic word for the word son. And bat means daughter. And to be the son and the daughter of mitzvot, of a mitzvah, means ultimately to be obligated by Jewish law in the fulfillment of commandments by the Torah. And therefore the bar and bat mitzvah celebration aims to commemorate this process and this milestone when every Jewish boy and girl at age 12 or 13, depending on the gender, becomes able to and comes of age in the eyes of Judaism. And as a practice that's very prevalent in today's times, to celebrate this notion of coming of age, of reaching Jewish adulthood. And there are classes in major Jewish organizations and synagogues, and even for grown adults who never had a bar and bar mitzvah, to recognize and to mark and to educate the process. The milestone of adulthood often passes with more celebration than sincerity, leaving a lot of questions out there to what exactly it's meant to be. And what I want to focus on tonight a little bit is why these ages of 12 and 13 were designated, and what exactly it means beyond the disco dance party and the rave and the limousine and the party and the celebration and whatever you do for it or you did for it or you're going to do or you're invited as a guest and you've been. What does it actually mean? And what is the religious significance? And why is it important? Any questions? Okay. Coming of age. While on a state visit to India in 1977, John Major, then Prime Minister of Britain, went to visit an ancient tribe that inhabits the mountain range of India and Tibet. He attended a poignant coming of age ceremony in which a group of 13-year-old boys was being welcomed in as men of the tribe. The Prime Minister watched as the father of each boy walked to his son, presented him with a symbol of manhood and tribal identity, which is a Kalashnikov rifle. The ceremony speaks volumes about the values in that society, highlighting that the most important value, self-preservation amidst the warring mountain tribes and communal pride in taking part in the tribe's defense. What are the values that we want to instill in our children? And what are the values that we hold dear that we want to see continued into the next generation? And it's an appreciation in many ways of the finer things in life, in good wine, good food, love of baseball. Yes, maybe it's your expertise in chess, maybe it's your stamp collection. But what are the things that you can't touch or see, but are the most important values and concepts and morals that you want to transmit to your children. And I think about this as we launch this discussion about bar and bat mitzvah, because these are the kinds of questions that you need to think about when you approach the topic of bar and bat mitzvah from a macro perspective, because this is Judaism's coming of age ceremony. And how do we want to express our Jewish values? And what legacy do the parents want to impart on their children? What's significant? Why should it be significant? And why is it significant at this specific point in their life? Let's look at the first source. The Mishnah in the tractate of Avot, a very well-known tractate known as Pirkei Avot, tells us as follows: a boy who's 13 becomes obligated in performing mitzvot. There's something about being 13 that obligates a Jewish boy from performing and fulfilling and adhering to the mitzvot. The rabbinic commentary on the book of Genesis, Bereshit Rabbah, writes that Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon said, until the age of 13, a father must take responsibility for his son. From then on, he should declare, blessed is he who is exemplary from being punished on account of this one. Now, the blessing is written in the negative, and that's a whole discussion unto itself. But ultimately, from the age of 13, a child is responsible for himself. Now, we don't send our children out to get their own apartments and to roam the streets and to be fully responsible for themselves. We're talking here in the guise and the lens of their existence as Jewish people and as members of the Jewish tribe. What do you think it is about 13? And it's not by any coincidence or chance that the age of bar and bat mitzvah coincided with the onset of puberty and adulthood. And in fact, the halachic, the Jewish definition of bar and bat mitzvah depends not only on reaching the age of 12 or 13, but it also has connection with the onset of puberty. And the concept of physical maturity is bound together in the onset of spiritual maturity and responsibility. And there's an ancient tradition that links the process of physical maturity to the development of spiritual capacity to be obligated in observing the mitzvot. The necessity, we could say, of physical maturity and its connection to spiritual maturity explains to us what clear distinction between guys and girls. No one thought they were having a biology class tonight.
Women mature girls mature faster than boys.
That's apparently what they say. Right. The necessity of physical maturity and its connection to spiritual maturity explains why girls reach the age earlier than guys, and therefore why a bat mitzvah happens at the age of 12 as opposed to 13. Have a look at this source here, middle of the page. A girl becomes a bat mitzvah at 12, whereas a boy becomes a bar mitzvah at 13, because the body's physical development goes in tandem with emotional and spiritual maturity. And because girls develop earlier physically, their emotional and spiritual maturity is earlier too. That's the primary reason. Need to also keep in mind that when we talk about the age of 13, we're talking about in a Jewish calendar. And what's the primary difference between the Jewish calendar and the secular calendar? Anyone?
We follow the moon.
Yeah,
This is
we
the sun.
follow the moon. 13 or 12 are neither lunar years or solar years. They are only calculated by the moon. So we know a little bit about bar and bat mitzvah, enough to have some questions. Are you ready? What is going on? We are Not sure what there's no correct answer means. I guess I'll understand at some point. Bar mitzvah, age of undertaking mitzvah, independent thought, and ultimate maturity. Okay, you've all been listening, which I'm very happy to hear. And happy to see everything here is correct, even despite the proclamation that there's no correct answer. Don't be scared off by the technology. And last question. Maybe not. Okay. A bar mitzvah is when? Not sure why it says that again. Everything is correct. Read from the Torah for the first time. Excellent. Okay, we'll talk about what the significance of that in just a minute as well. Okay. Who is drawing on my screen? I know who you are. The 12 or 13 persons obligated to keep mitzvot and is held accountable for their actions. But what's so wonderful about being accountable for your actions? In the United States, people are held accountable under the law as adults from the age of 18, but nobody celebrates that transition. Nobody has a party and says, hey, I'm 18, I'm now responsible for all the things I'm gonna do according to the law of the United States of America. If anything, adulthood is lauded for the release of restrictions. You can acquire a driver's license or consume alcohol. So why does Judaism make a big deal about the physical maturity and the acquisition of legal responsibility in the eyes of Judaism? And there's a lot to talk about in the relation to this. And hopefully children start fulfilling mitzvot and doing good deeds before the time of the bar mitzvah. But there's a fundamental difference between the quality of their actions before the transition and after. And Judaism places a premium on fulfilling one's obligation to the point that acting in response to a commandment is considered not only morally superior to volunteering on one's own volition. We'll see exactly what that means. The struggle between doing something out of your own desire by the awareness of God's will is the distinction here. In Jewish thought, this experience is described as the battle that one has between the Yetzer Hatov, the good inclination, and the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. And this battle, according to Jewish theology, only begins at the Bar and Bat Mitzvah, with the acquisition at that time of this notion of the Yetzer Hatov, which balances off the good inclination, that balances off the evil inclination. And these terms are kind of misleading by the translation. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper together. In order to appreciate the significance of becoming a Bar Mitzvah, we need to take a step back and understand early child development in a Jewish style. A person's soul, which has its roots in the spiritual world, starts with a clear perception of the truth, which is then lost upon at the coming of birth. Have a look at this source, top of the page. Although Jewish custom is not to celebrate birthdays, it's customary to celebrate the day a child becomes bar mitzvah, or the following Shabbat, once 13 years have come to completion. The day a child becomes bar mitzvah is greater than the day upon which he was born, and certainly greater than any other day, birthday, when a child is born. It's far from being complete, But on the day of your bar mitzvah, having been trained in the Torah and mitzvot, the completely acceptance upon himself the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, and it's granted the good inclination. At that point, his birth is complete. Why is this all important? The bar mitzvah celebrates the true beginning of life. The spiritual understanding here, obviously you're alive when you're born, but in a spiritual way, when you are able to go about and connect things and do things for yourself, this is a spiritual definition here in a very deep and powerful way. How do you celebrate a bar mitzvah? What do you do? What is the correct thing to do? And the flip side, what should you not do? So there's no correct answer. You can celebrate in any meaningful way that's meaningful to you and your family, and people do that differently. The late Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the Rabbi Lubavitch, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, writes that the day of the bar mitzvah is a cherished day of great joy, because the bar mitzvah boy becomes complete part of Israel, and therefore people celebrate that with a celebration, with gifts, with the whole list of many other celebrations. But there's not one thing you should do. Having a party is pretty much a very common thing that people do, and they celebrate with friends and with family. A lot of people have the custom of traveling to Israel, having their bar mitzvah at the Kotel at the Western Wall, but there's not one strict performance of the celebration, which is important. Time, a couple of minutes for questions. Tonight we covered birth, baby naming, the Brit Milah, the value of retaining a Jewish identity and Jewish name, the importance of circumcision, when, where, how, the importance of the covenant of circumcision, and we touched a little bit on bar and bat mitzvah. I should have said this at the start, and I'll say this now at the end. This is an introduction to the Jewish life cycles. This is not a comprehensive doctoral program in Jewish life cycles. So if this leaves you with more questions than answers, then we were successful, because you're meant to go out and embark on a journey that involves reading and learning and growing. This is just meant to whet the appetite and give you enough understanding about the foundations and the frameworks and the scaffolding that exists around Jewish life cycles, and in particular, baby naming, circumcision, and bar and bat mitzvah. Next Thursday, we will unpack Jewish dating, the wedding, the engagement period, and the wedding period. We might even watch some clips from my wedding, which will be a lot of fun. Bring some popcorn. And look forward to seeing you all there. At 8:45 tonight, we have our pre-Shabbat inspiration with myself and Rachel. Please come back in 45 minutes. If you are on the Upper East Side and able to join us, we have services this Saturday at 10:45 outdoors on the roof. It's going to be a gorgeous day. So come join us. Please register. And if you're around on Sunday, we're having a gathering in Central Park, a brunch to be together in a socially distant, safe way. Our community is large, and there are people that are not able to come indoors, not wanting to come indoors, or people that just want to hang out with us as much as possible. So any opportunity they get, they'll join. But look forward to seeing anyone everywhere and nowhere, wherever you're comfortable coming, please do, or not. If you have questions on anything we discussed tonight, or on anything, feel free to always email me. Email address is in the chat. Thank you, Shabbat Shalom. And just like we started the class tonight, all the feelings and all the thoughts that you might have had the last 24, 48 hours are important, are real, but take a moment out to pause and to reflect on the reasons that we should be grateful, which is our health and our blessings, and everything that's swirling around us in this country will settle, and the sunlight will come out for all of us tomorrow. The class sources are here as well. And thank you all for coming. Have a great night. See you at 8:45.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
so
Rabbi.
much.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.